This is a recap from our last session. But remembering back to Friday, where we were speaking about Job, we were focusing on how pride got in the way of the conversation that Job was having with his three friends, the pride of being right, and yet God reminding Job that he's not in control of other people. He's not in control of other people's hearts and minds. And we looked at that fact that self-control is the one thing that we can kind of take care of for ourselves. So we began to look at some frameworks to see the world through that hopefully help us. We looked at the idea of the worldview, the narrative, and the reality that we all have, how that can be changed. And when that changes, we can have that sense of fear in our lives that everything else can come falling down. We're aware that to get through those fear elements, those fear moments, we have to have maps. We have to have ways of dealing with the world when it becomes unknown. And we looked at how the law was a map for the people of Israel for a long part of their history, and how love is the map when Christ comes to kind of fulfill the law. Love is the map to get through those unknowns. We're going to look at one more framework to help us understand how people think this morning, and then we're going to try and tie it all together, breaking bread, focusing on Jesus as our example to how to get on with each other. So we also looked at the emotional layer that we have to acknowledge before we maybe get onto any intellectual conversations. The idea that we all have emotional attachments. We sometimes come to people as children when actually we need to maybe be more eloquent in the way that we ask for things and want to be listened to, and be aware that that's actually what we want. And also be aware of how other people can make us feel when they parent us, and try and respond to them so that we can have an adult-to-adult conversation. So before we have any intellectual conversation, we need to have that emotional conversation. And I suggest there's also another one that comes in before we have the intellectual conversation. That's the moral foundation of the conversation that we're going to have. So we're going to look at something now called, it sounds quite cool actually, the moral matrix. But the best way to think about this is as if they're moral taste buds. In the same way that we all have different palates, we all actually have a different moral palate, and we'll go on to see what that means. This is the work of a man called Jonathan Haidt, and his is put forward in a book called The Righteous Mind, and it's exceptionally good. He puts forward the idea that we have 6 moral taste buds, things that are innate, that we're kind of born with these things kind of hardwired into us to a greater or lesser degree. Our moral taste buds are care, liberty, fairness, loyalty, authority, and sanctity. So just like we have other reflexes, one in your knee, when you tap your knee and it twitches, or when a cat lands on its feet, we have these things as kind of impulses, things that part of the the amygdala part of the brain that just kind of click into action without us really thinking about them.
I would be careful to say it comes from your amygdala. I think that's more of a... Anyway, we're not experts in this. But I would interject to say that Jonathan Haidt's work is quite impressive because it's very well researched, and he didn't sort of have this idea of, I think there's 6 moral foundations. He was kind of trying to work out and kind of solve problems that he could see in kind of politics and religious debate, and then it was through lots and lots of kind of experience and kind of research and things that he kind of came up with this idea. So that's why for me it's quite legitimate.
Mm-hmm. So our moral taste buds tell us if we want to spit an idea out, or if we're like, that's interesting, I like that, that's stimulating. It's based on a group survival instinct. If I have time, I'll go into that. And it's a big part of what makes up our worldview. So if I were to say to you, you know what, actually, found out that Jamin's been stealing from the benevolent fund, you might get a bit of a taste in what? Why? Well, he's been stealing from the benevolent fund. And we'll have an instinctive kind of disgust reaction at this thing of, that's not fair. That doesn't have any loyalty to the good work that the benevolent fund do, and that goes against some authority that we think about in terms of like what God says is right, and there's some sanctity maybe about the history of the benevolent fund, and it doesn't care for people. So we have this kind of impulsive reactions. Jamin, you terrible person. Sorry, I'm on you.
Weird that we can't see you because I don't know if you're actually just crying right now.
I'm laughing.
Good. So let's have a look at these individual taste buds with a bit more detail. Obviously, they have their opposite as well. So care, harm.
So just quickly in that example, everyone will have a reaction to the idea of Jamin being a terrible person, but it'll be for different reasons. So for some people, it'll be like, oh, the benevolent fund, they are such a, they are an authority. They've been around for so long, you should respect them. And other people say, oh my goodness, like there's old people who need that money for their heating over. Oh, my friend needed that money because, all that kind of stuff. So we have a reaction to it, but kind of for different reasons. Mm-hmm. The same way someone would eat something. So, oh, I really like that because of that nice sour taste. And someone else would say, oh, no, I like it because it's got that sweet taste and stuff like that. Carry on.
Maybe another more polarizing example would be, and it's in Jonathan Hart's book, is someone using, it's an American book, someone using the American flag that they found in the bottom of their drawer just to clean the car with. And for some people that'd be like, so what, it's just a flag. For some people, like, that has real like authority and sanctity, that flag. That means something very important. That's wrong to do that. So you get a split of people who think that's wrong and who think that's maybe just fine, no one cares. So looking at care, harm, we all have that gut feeling. If we see someone trip over on the street and bump themselves, we all feel it ourselves in some way. That kind of, oh dear, and we want to go and help that person back up, or we want to see someone else help that person back up if we don't get to them as before them. And it's that experience of sympathy toward individuals who are in harm or suffering. We're often driven to care for those in need. That's care, harm. We have an instinct for autonomy and freedom. We may be feeling right now that we have our liberty squashed a bit, but we're doing it for a greater good. So we're able to override that and say, this is actually to care for people and to help people out. We don't like it when people exercise too much authority over individuals, and we will want their liberty if they are being bullied or oppressed. The law of reciprocity. As soon as someone tries to get their share without putting in their work, we will likely see them as dishonest and immoral, and we want to continue working with them. So if we're working on a project with someone and someone starts slacking and not pulling their weight, the next time we come to do a project, we're like, I don't want to work with them, and they just didn't do anything. And also to the other extreme where they start cheating and kind of taking more than their fair share, then we also will not want them in our group. There's that idea of like, we like our group to thrive. We don't want people in our group that are going to take more than what will help our group move forward. Loyalty, betrayal. Loyalty helps us form strong relationships and see beyond ourselves as just individuals. When a group is centered around a common cause, it can accomplish a lot more than a group which is less uniform and cohesive. That one's fairly self-explanatory. When we all have a common goal, like if you support a football team and you're all loyal to that football team, and that will hold, if you go to a football match, you might go to the stand, you might stand next to people you don't know, but because you're all loyal to this one thing, you'll form a bond and you'll all cheer together and share that moment together. Church is like that, isn't it? Authority subversion. So this one's interesting. It's our desire for social order and hierarchy. So we're actually quite grateful at the moment that now there is a government that are telling us what to do in this situation, because that authority means that everybody can be under that authority and do as they say, and it'll help us through this situation. Another example would be if I suddenly get appendicitis, I want to find someone like a doctor who has the authority and the skills and the knowledge and has the certificate that says they can help me with this. I don't want to have to learn how to take my own appendix out. I don't have to learn all that and get that authority and that knowledge. I'm happy that there are other people with that knowledge and authority to do that for me, so I don't have to worry about it. That means I can get on doing what I do and they can do what they do, and it benefits everyone, especially when this authority is based on knowledge, experience, and merit. Sanctity and degradation. This is more of an ancient kind of thing in our brains. It comes probably from more ancient past of having sacred objects, but we certainly do this with ideas. There are certain ideas that are sacred. So the breaking of bread and the memorial, that's a sacred part of our fellowship. And if we were to kind of say, actually, we don't need that, a lot of people are like, well, hold on, no, this is sacred. This is something that we want to keep pure. I mean, that's actually an instinct. It's not something people, all these things and always things people do much thought or with consciously. Yeah. So,
sorry, Tom, you cut out for me slightly there. Did you say that the breaking of bread was sacred, or is something that people hold sacred?
yeah, it's something certain people hold sacred. I mean, or the way it happens can be sacred. For some people, it can be, if you change it, it's like devastating. For some people, they can probably change the way that works. But the actual sharing of bread and wine is probably something that we all would say, yeah, that's really important and necessary.
So people have that moral taste bud to a greater or lesser degree. I guess for some people, having the breaking of bread with like another language being interpreted, some people find that really hard because they're like, no, this sort of disrupts the beautiful ritual and the kind of sanctity of what's going on. Or like doing the breaking bread over Zoom, this isn't the same thing. It's that, that feeling of like, oh, but this isn't right. It's supposed to be a precious, sanctified thing. Mm-hmm. And people feel that to a lesser or greater degree.
Yeah, I've got here on the screen those 6 moral taste buds, and I've got liberal and conservative there. And we've been speaking already and kind of confirming in our discussion groups, I think, that like James was saying, we don't label ourselves as liberal or conservative. We can sometimes say, well, I'm kind of quite liberal on that idea, but on this idea, I'm probably maybe more conservative. Or
well, you don't say like I'm conservative on that. You say
I hold conservative ideas on that. So yeah, it's important not to label ourselves liberal or conservative. Or others, indeed. But what Jonathan Hyatt has found out is he asked thousands of people who identified themselves as either liberal and conservative a set of questions that identified the importance of these 6 things in their lives. For liberals who had self-identified, care, liberty and fairness have a far higher moral weight than the loyalty to a group, the authority to a group, or the sanctity of a group. Yet for those who identified as conservative, care, liberty and fairness are balanced by loyalty, authority and sanctity. So I'm going to do this as a, I hope this isn't too slow. But the thickness of the line is the weighting of the importance in these things.
So an interesting thing for me is that care, liberty and fairness are more to do with the individual, whereas loyalty, authority and sanctity are more to do with the idea of keeping a group and keeping traditions alive. And kind of reading this book and looking into these things kind of really changed my mind about what's important, particularly with a church, because I would think of myself as having quite liberal views and being quite a kind of like open to change kind of person. So things like when I saw people saying, oh no, but you've got to be loyal, you can't believe those things because it means that you're not a Christadelphian, you need to stick within these rules, like be loyal to, because you have to attend all those things because you need to show your loyalty to the group. And then, but what about the authority of, this is what the magazine said, or this is what the AB said, or the sanctity of we must keep it the same and keep it precious and pure. Those things didn't really appeal to me. But actually, I started to realise, reading these things, there is an importance in those things. You need to meter them with the care, liberty and fairness that look after the individual. But however, a good example is kind of the meeting that we go to is, it's very informal. It does mean that stuff doesn't really get organised properly. So it can sometimes mean that the individual people who are maybe struggling don't get looked after that well, because things like loyalty, authority and sanctity that form everyone together into a really cohesive group aren't there, so that actually bigger sort of organisational structures kind of fall apart. So you do need a balance of both, and that really kind of opened my mind to how you can have a healthy balance where you don't have loyalty, authority and sanctity being used as like a cane to beat people with.
Yeah, so where this maybe all comes together and makes sense, those that identify as liberal, the most sacred value is care for the oppressed individual. So it's very individualistic, like Naomi was saying. The conservative, the most sacred value is preserving the institution and tradition that sustain the moral community. So that means that when we think about, and this is probably to do with our development as humans, we all started off in small groups. And if you think about like a pack of wolves, the wolf that is limping at the back holds back the group, and the group can't really move forward when that wolf is in that position. So it's either you let it die and you move the group forward, or but as we become developed into a more agricultural and have more civilized society, we can look after those individuals. And there's a whole bit of history of humanity in how these things have kind of come together, which is worth looking into. But maybe it's explained best in this verse. So this verse is going to be interpreted differently by these two different groups. So then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone. So there's the liberal person, they're going, yes, do good to absolutely everyone. Look for every individual and serve them. But maybe the Conservative will put more weight on that second part, and especially to those who are of the household of faith. So there's like a weighting of actually that, but that group is really important as well. Here's how this could play out in a conversation. So having a conversation about sexuality, somebody with strong care, fairness, and liberty foundations could say something like, I don't think it's fair the way that we treat the homosexual community as a group. I don't think we are fair to them and not caring for them. If you have strong authority, loyalty, and sanctity foundation, you might go straight to a authoritative Bible verse that says, well, our authority is the Bible. This is what it says, and provide that as the answer. And so as we've already heard from our kind of parent-child adults thing, maybe that's not answering the question that's being asked, or it's not acknowledging what's going on. I'd suggest if someone comes to you with a question and you need to listen for the foundation that it's based on. If it's based on care, fairness, and liberty, you need to acknowledge that. And you need to say, okay, I'm hearing you, I'm hearing what you're saying, and acknowledging that, yes, it doesn't appear fair, before you move on to anything else. You may have ideas about what the Bible says about that, but you need to listen to that person first and understand where the question's coming from. Otherwise, they won't acknowledge your answer as a response.
But just as validly, if someone is coming to you saying, oh, but we can't allow that because this is just the way we've always done things, and maybe someone has just a kind of ingrained kind of homophobia as well, which goes against their idea of like the sanctity of church. And even if you find that really, really difficult, you have to acknowledge that's kind of where that person is coming from, and their loyalty to the group, that thing of, oh, if we allow this, then what will happen to the group of Christadelphia? Like, this is so important to me. So kind of acknowledging that, and then if you go in with that, oh, but what about the individual? Actually, you're talking about different things, and it's really, really hard because these are really divisive things that we just have in the very core of us, which things appeal to us more than the other. But it's really important to acknowledge it in other people. And
I think in big group discussions, we're often trying to steer the conversation. Okay, so someone says something, and you go, yeah, but what about care? And then they go, yeah, but what about loyalty? And then you kind of, and so your conversation's doing this rather than actually having any listening going on. The person who's asked that question about care, fairness, and liberty, and has that response of authority, loyalty, and sanctity, will actually hear from the person saying this thing about authority, loyalty, and sanctity, that they want to harm, cheat, and oppress in this situation. And you might respond and say, well, that's harmful, that's cheating, that's oppressive. And then the person with authority, loyalty, and sanctity as their foundation will hear you saying, well, you're subjugating the authority of the Bible, you're betraying the group, and you're degrading the moral foundation of the group itself. So you can see that if we're not listening to people's moral foundations, we absolutely miss each other, and we rile each other up, and we misinterpret what we're saying. Okay, so the listening technique is what kind of pulls all this together, really.
It's quite tricky to do this in a short amount of time, maybe, but because we have presented something that's quite difficult, and then to be able to kind of explain, and this is now how you navigate around this, but something that is really, really useful that we found in the Alpha Marriage Preparation course, it's really, really good, we'd really, really recommend it, is the listening technique.
This is how you do adult to adult, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, so this is reflective of all the other things that we've talked about, how you do have more positive conversations and don't have a Jovian 42 chapters long conversation that doesn't go
42-year-long marriage.
But this isn't just, we definitely don't want to say this is just for kind of married couples. This is for any sort of interaction, any kind of interaction that you have. And it's the old cliche of listen to understand rather than listen to answer, listen, waiting so you can just say something, actually listen to really understand where that person is coming from. Mm-hmm. So there's a kind of framework for it, which I'd say if you're first having a go at it, stick to the framework because it really, really helps. But then eventually it'll kind of become more of a habit. Also, after we had sort of learned about this, I remember listening in. I think I wasn't very well, or I was doing something else, and listening into Bible class where Tom was, and Tom was trying to use this technique. But obviously in a way he hadn't sort of said to the other person, oh, I'm doing the listening technique with you. He just sort of tried to ask them questions and repeat stuff back to them. And in a big group conversation, it was a bit challenging. It all went a bit crazy, which was quite funny to listen to. So it is best in a one-on-one thing, but it's also good for your general interactions. So say I have a beef with Tom. The idea is I'd say, Tom, I need to do the listening techniques. I really need to listen to me. So I would, first of all, partner one, because I am number one, I would say how I'm feeling. So I'd say, Tom, you left your coffee thing on the side again, and it really annoys me because I do the washing up and then I like to have the kitchen clear and it's still there. So Tom would then repeat this back to me, ask if this right.
Yes, so I'd say what's brilliant about this is it stops me going, wow, oh, come on, stop having a go at me. Like, you did this the other day, you did that the other day, now Naomi's listening to me griping. So it kind of spins off and goes spiraling downward. Instead, I have to kind of focus and go, I have to swallow that kind of urge to kind of...
Swallow your pride.
Swallow my pride and go, okay, right, so I left my coffee cup on the table the other day and it really annoys you. Is that right?
In a moment, we're going to get you to practice listening to each other. But first, Nikki and I are going to have a conversation in front of you to try to demonstrate what effective listening looks like and sounds like.
I'm going to tell Scylla something that's bothering me. And we're going to use a technique that will help to show me she's listening, seeking to understand me and to empathise with me. Of course, that can be hard for any of us to do if I'm telling her something about her own behaviour. We all desperately want to justify ourselves rather than try to see it from our partner's point of view. And we don't learn this kind of listening overnight. It takes a lot of practice.
I have absolutely no idea what Nikki's going to talk to me about. This is not rehearsed. When he's told me, I'm going to try to reflect back what he said. That is, repeat back to him what he's told me, particularly any feelings that he's expressed. If I haven't understood properly, he'll tell me again. Then I'm going to ask him, what's concerning you most about what you've just told me? Then I'll listen and repeat back to him again. Then I'm going to ask him, is there anything that you could do, or if it's appropriate, you'd like me or us to do about what you've just said? Then I'll listen and reflect back again. And finally, I'm going to ask him, is there anything else that you'd like to say? So, Nikki, what's the issue that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I wanted to talk about times when we're driving in the car. Actually, more specifically, when I'm driving. And I suppose over the years, we've probably had our most futile arguments in the car. And I know that there are times when I don't know the way and I have to ask you for directions, and that's great. But there are other times when I think I do know the way, and when you sort of tell me that you think your way is better, I feel, well, I sort of feel rather undermined and actually upset. I mean, I don't think I express it really very much, but actually it makes me feel you don't trust the way that I want to go. And I think over the years, actually, when we've had people in the car, when our children were younger, when they were with us, I felt rather undermined by your never sort of trusting that my way might perhaps be better.
Okay, so the issue is about when we're in the car and when we're going somewhere in the car, and you think that over the years we've probably had some of our most futile arguments in the car, and it's usually about the sort of me giving you directions. Obviously, sometimes you don't know the way and you need me to give you directions, but sometimes you know the way and you don't want me telling you how to go. And it's when I give you those directions, when you do actually know the way, that it makes you feel kind of quite undermined. It's as if I don't trust you.
Yeah.
And particularly when there are other people in the car, like when, you know, our children were younger and it was in front of them and I'd be going on and you felt particularly undermined and, yeah, what was the other thing you said? Undermined and...
Well, and upset. I don't think I don't express usually when I'm upset, but it does upset me that, you know, you don't trust that I might know the best way to go.
So it's the upset, you get upset.
Yeah.
Really, it's that I might not trust you knowing the right way to go. And out of all of that, what's concerning you most about what you've said, really? What's at the heart of it?
I think it's that I feel you don't give me credit for the fact I might sometimes know a better way. So that I think what's most important is that, you know, you don't sort of allow me sometimes to go the way that I want to go. Or if I do go the way I want to go, that you attack me.
So you feel that I don't give you credit for knowing the way that we're going, and even if I do, or sort of if I tell you which way to go, you just feel that I'm attacking you. Is that right?
Yeah, I think just that.
And so what do you think that you could do about this situation? Or perhaps it's more like, what could I do about this situation?
Well, I was thinking about it, and I wonder if we could have an agreement that whoever of us is driving is the final arbiter, makes the final decision, and certainly, I'm sure I will ask you for advice as to which way to go, but when I'm driving, I'd love to have the final decision, and when you're driving, then you have the final decision.
Okay, so you feel it'd be really good if we made a kind of agreement that whoever's driving has the final decision about which way we're going. So if you're driving, you can make the final decision and go your way, and if I'm driving, then I can do the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
So is there anything else that you want to say?
Well, I suppose I do feel it's a bit silly waiting 28 years to talk to you about this. But probably, well, we could work on it for the coming years. Anyway, that's all right.
Okay, so you think it's a pity we waited 28 years to talk about it like this and for you to tell me what you feel about it, but we can work on it from now on. Yeah,
exactly.
All these things are surface usually, and there's always kind of something that it distills down to that you can get down to through the listening technique. It obviously takes a lot longer than that. That was a really kind of tried example of something, especially if it's about, you know, head covering sexuality or whatever. So you're going to be spending a long time doing this process, and it's really important that you spend that time to do it. And also, you might start instigating here's the lesson what to do, and they might not want to do it back. And
you do have to be in a very particular place to be like calm enough to do this, and also you have to have certain personalities to do this as well. And if I think as well, if a relationship has already turned very sour, it's very difficult to kind of work together on this. But you can use things like, if someone has said something to you and maybe feels like they've accused you, and your automatic thing is, I've got a defense to that. Actually think, no, swallow my pride, repeat back to them what they've said, and you can say things like, oh, can I just double check that I've got that right? And then, oh, okay, so I understand this. And so what's the worst thing about that for you? Can I find out, like, is there anything that you think is the worst thing, and kind of stuff, and then the person really feels like they've been listened to. And I actually used this at work a while ago, and basically because I kept repeating back and listening, this lady just talked herself around to my way of thinking anyway, and it was great. So I didn't actually have to do
she had all the answers to her questions, didn't she? And she just basically needed to feel like I had listened to her and that she'd been understood. And so, I mean, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, but it's something that really, it's a technique that really brings together all these ideas. So if we go back to this, if someone comes at you with this concern that we're not treating the homosexual community with care and fairness, if you repeat that back to them, then they'll feel listened to, and that foundation will be met. That it kind of does that emotional and moral thing at the same time. You kind of listen for both of those. You're allowing that person to say what's concerning them, what emotions they have behind it, and also you were able to understand this person coming from a care foundation, before then moving on to anything about verses or cultural context and the like.